The payment system that processed $47 billion in transactions every single day across 12 companies just got stripped away from its billionaire owner by a federal judge. Not because of bankruptcy, not because of fraud charges. The judge said it themselves. Corporate structure poses imminent threat to democratic institutions. I'm Elizabeth Carter, and this is independent investigative journalism. Before we go any further, I need you to do something right now. Hit that subscribe button, click the notification bell, leave a comment below telling me, have you ever seen a judge strip someone's entire company before? Share this video with everyone you know. This is the only official channel doing this kind of deep dive analysis. What I'm about to show you happened 72 hours ago, and it's spreading. Here's the core argument tonight in plain language. This isn't about one tech billionaire losing his empire. This is about a legal precedent that just rewrote the limits of corporate power in America. This isn't about politics. It's about power structures that affect every single person watching this video. Tonight, I'm going to walk you through the 72-hour timeline that changed corporate law forever, the emergency motion that triggered it, and the constitutional earthquake that's still shaking Washington. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why legal experts are calling this the most significant judicial action since the 1911 Standard Oil breakup. January 3rd, 2026, Federal District Court. An unprecedented judicial seizure following an emergency motion filed by state attorneys general. One judge worked through the night to issue a ruling that legal scholars say hasn't been seen in over a century. The billionaire's entire corporate empire, 12 companies controlling everything from social media to satellite internet to payment processing, placed under federal receivership in a single stroke of a pen. Corporate power exceeding governmental authority. Those were the judge's exact words. Think about that. A federal judge just declared that a private citizen had accumulated so much power that it threatened the basic functioning of democratic government. That is not abstract legal theory. That is a constitutional crisis playing out in real time. And this is just the beginning. Here's what you need to understand about this billionaire's empire. 12 companies across every piece of critical digital infrastructure that controls how Americans communicate, pay for things, and access information. The social media platform with 2.4 billion users worldwide, the payment system processing 47 billion daily, the satellite internet connecting rural communities, the artificial intelligence systems training on every conversation, every purchase, every search, combined market capitalization approaching Apple and Microsoft levels. Translation: one person controlling the information flow and economic transactions for half the planet. Let me show you the warnings that everyone ignored. Dr. Sarah Chen, Stanford antitrust researcher, testified to Congress in March 2024. We are approaching a dangerous threshold where private corporate power exceeds governmental regulatory capacity. The European Union spent 18 months trying to create oversight mechanisms for exactly this concentration of power. They failed. The Department of Justice opened 3 separate investigations into monopolistic practices. All 3 were quietly dropped after what officials called insufficient evidence. Let that sink in. Other democracies already tried to stop this, and they couldn't. Now here's what triggered the emergency judicial action. December 28th, 2025. The social media platform's algorithm started suppressing voter registration content in swing districts. January 1st, 2026. The payment system froze accounts belonging to 847 small businesses that had donated to specific political campaigns. January the 2nd, satellite internet service went dark in 6 counties during organized protests about local election irregularities. 3 days, 3 coordinated actions. This wasn't technical glitches or routine maintenance. Internal company documents leaked to state attorneys general showed deliberate political interference across multiple platforms under single ownership. Think about the legal precedent here. In 1911, the Supreme Court broke up Standard Oil because John D. Rockefeller controlled 91% of oil refining in America. The court said no private citizen should control an entire industry that affects every American's daily life. Fast forward to 2026. This tech billionaire doesn't just control one industry. He controls the infrastructure that every other industry depends on. When your restaurant can't process payments because you shared the wrong news article, that's not market competition. That's economic coercion as political weapon. The emergency judicial powers doctrine hasn't been used since the Great Depression banking crisis. Federal judges can seize private assets when they pose clear and present danger to democratic institutions. The legal theory is simple. Corporate power cannot be allowed to exceed governmental authority in a constitutional republic. But here's what makes this case unprecedented. Previous emergency seizures were about preventing economic collapse. This seizure was about preventing democratic collapse. The judge's 47-page ruling cited evidence of systematic suppression of political speech through economic pressure. Let me introduce you to someone whose story explains why this matters. Maria Santos owns a third-generation family restaurant in Houston, Texas. For 15 years, she used the billionaire's payment system exclusively because of their low transaction fees and reliable service. On January 1st, she posted a link on social media about irregularities in her local school board election. Within 6 hours, her payment processing account was frozen pending what the company called routine compliance review. 43 years my family has built this business, she told local reporters. Gone because I shared a news article about my own community. Maria's January revenue, $0. Her trapped funds, $12,000. Her suppliers demanding immediate payment. Translation, political speech now controls economic survival in America. Let me tell you Maria's complete story, because this is where abstract corporate power becomes real human devastation. Maria Santos, third-generation owner of Casa Santos restaurant in Houston, Texas. Her grandfather started serving authentic Mexican food to construction workers in 1981. Her father expanded to catering quinceañeras and wedding receptions. Maria took over in 2019 and survived the pandemic by pivoting to delivery and community meal programs. 43 years of building trust, one meal at a time. The exclusive contract with the billionaire's payment system seemed like smart business. Lower transaction fees meant more money for fresh ingredients and fair wages for her 7 employees. January 1st, 2026. Maria shared a local news article about irregularities in her school board election on her personal social media account. The article questioned why 3 precincts had voter machines that malfunctioned during the morning rush when working parents typically vote. 6 hours later, her business payment account showed a red notification, account frozen pending compliance review for potential violation of community standards. 40 years my family built this, Maria told the Houston Chronicle. Gone because I shared a news article about my own neighborhood school board. Here are the financial details that show you how economic warfare actually works. $12,000 trapped in the frozen account. Weekly supplier payments due, $3,400 for produce, meat, and dairy. Payroll for 7 employees, $2,100 every Friday. Rent for the building, $4,200 monthly. Utilities and insurance, $890 monthly. Maria had exactly $1,247 in her personal checking account when the freeze happened. Translation: political speech now determines whether American families can feed themselves. Jake Morrison worked as a content moderator for the billionaire's social media platform from 2023 to early 2026. College graduate with a degree in communications, hoping to break into digital media. His job was reviewing flagged posts and applying community guidelines to borderline content. What he witnessed over 18 months was systematic algorithmic suppression of specific political viewpoints. Internal company emails, leaked to the Washington Post, show deliberate programming to reduce visibility of content related to election integrity, small business advocacy, and decentralized internet alternatives. I kept thinking someone in management would notice the bias and fix it, Jake told congressional investigators last week. Instead, every monthly update made the suppression more sophisticated. We had different rules for different users based on their political activity. If you donated to certain candidates, shared certain articles, or followed certain accounts, your reach got throttled. The psychological impact on Jake was severe. Post-traumatic stress disorder from what his therapist calls moral injury, deliberately suppressing constitutionally protected political speech for 8 hours daily, destroyed his ability to sleep. He quit on January 5th, 3 days after the judicial seizure. And Maria is not alone. The network effects of weaponized payment processing spread like economic wildfire across 47 states in the first week of January. Data analysis by the Small Business Administration shows 23,147 independent businesses experienced account freezes, delays, or sudden policy enforcement between January 1st and January 8th, restaurants, retail stores, service providers, freelancers, farmers market vendors. The common thread, owners had engaged in political speech that the algorithm flagged as problematic. Senator Rebecca Williams from Michigan held emergency hearings on January 10th. We are witnessing economic warfare disguised as terms of service violations, she told the Senate Banking Committee. When private companies can destroy livelihoods based on political speech, we no longer live in a free market economy. We live under corporate authoritarianism. Think about that. A sitting United States senator used the phrase corporate authoritarianism in official congressional testimony. The pattern becomes undeniable when you see the scope. Coffee shop owner in Portland posted about supporting local candidates. Account frozen. Auto repair shop in Tennessee shared article critical of big tech monopolies. Account frozen. Bookstore in Vermont promoted free speech events. Account frozen. Hair salon in Arizona posted about election security concerns. Account frozen. This isn't random enforcement of neutral policies. This is systematic targeting of political opposition using economic pressure. Dr. Sarah Chen, the Stanford researcher who warned Congress in 2024, watched her predictions come true in real time. I hoped I was wrong when I testified that constitutional crisis would occur within 24 months, she told reporters on January 6th. I wasn't wrong. I was optimistic about the timeline. What we're seeing is the complete weaponization of private economic infrastructure against political participation. When sharing a news article can destroy your family business, democracy has already ended. We just haven't admitted it yet. Here's the corporate response, and watch how they translate their own authoritarian policies into sanitized corporate speak. Company spokesperson Jennifer Walsh told CNN, these account reviews represent routine compliance measures designed to ensure platform integrity and protect users from harmful misinformation that could undermine democratic institutions. Translation: we decide what political opinions are allowed, and we will destroy your economic life if you disagree with us. And it gets worse. Internal documents obtained through the emergency judicial proceedings show coordination between the payment platform, social media algorithms, and satellite internet service disruptions. Company executives held weekly strategy meetings about what they called political alignment initiatives. CEO Marcus Richardson's leaked internal memo from December 15th. Our platforms cannot remain neutral when democracy itself is at stake. Business success requires active participation in preserving democratic norms. Translation: your political alignment determines your access to economic infrastructure. The domino chain becomes clear when you follow the money and the technology. First domino: social media algorithm suppresses voter registration in targeted districts. Second domino: payment system enforces political compliance through economic pressure. Third domino: satellite internet creates information blackouts during protests or organizing activities. Fourth domino: artificial intelligence systems train on biased data sets to automate political discrimination. Fifth domino: democratic participation becomes impossible without corporate approval. Translation: one billionaire's political preferences become national policy through private infrastructure control. That is not theoretical democracy erosion. That is real families losing real businesses because they exercised constitutional rights. Maria Santos represents 23,147 small business owners who learned that political freedom and economic survival are no longer compatible in America, and this was just the first week. Now let me show you the complete domino chain that forced a federal judge to seize a private empire to save democratic institutions. This isn't about one billionaire going rogue. This is about systematic corporate capture of the infrastructure that makes democracy possible. First domino: platform algorithm changes during election season reduce voter registration content visibility by 67% in targeted congressional districts. Internal analytics show deliberate suppression affecting an estimated 2.3 million potential voters. Second domino: payment system begins enforcing political compliance through selective account freezes, affecting 23,847 small businesses that engaged in constitutionally protected political speech. Third domino: satellite internet service creates strategic information blackouts in rural areas during organized protests, cutting communication for entire counties. Fourth domino: artificial intelligence systems trained on politically biased data sets begin automating discrimination in hiring, lending, and service delivery across multiple industries. Fifth domino, democratic participation becomes impossible without corporate approval from a single private authority. Translation: one person's political preferences effectively become national policy through infrastructure control. Here's the silent authority problem that terrifies constitutional scholars. Congress sent 47 formal requests for testimony to company executives over 18 months, all 47 ignored. The Federal Trade Commission admits in internal documents that existing antitrust law is insufficient for platform-based monopolies. Attorney General Patricia Morrison told the Justice Department staff meeting on December 20th, "We lack enforcement mechanisms adequate for this scale of private power." Translation: the United States government officially acknowledged it cannot control a private citizen who has captured democratic infrastructure. The international dimension makes this a global constitutional crisis, not just an American political problem. The European Union spent 18 months and 200 million euros trying to create regulatory oversight for exactly this concentration of power. They failed. Their final report concluded that traditional government regulation cannot match the speed and scale of platform-based control systems. China banned all of the billionaires' platforms entirely after what Beijing called repeated interference attempts in domestic political processes. Canada invoked emergency measures during the satellite blackout incident that affected 3 provinces during trucker protests. Think about that. 3 different democratic governments tried 3 different approaches to controlling this private power. All 3 failed. The academic warning system was flashing red for 2 years before the judicial intervention. Harvard Kennedy School published a study in September 2024 titled "Corporate Capture of Information Infrastructure: An Existential Threat to Democratic Governance." MIT Technology Review analysis from November 2024 warned that platform-based systemic threats to electoral integrity were becoming mathematically unavoidable. Stanford Law Review published Constitutional Commerce: When Private Power Exceeds Public Authority in December 2024. Translation: 3 of America's top universities agreed this was an existential threat to democratic institutions, and everyone ignored them. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, constitutional law professor at Georgetown, provided the legal foundation for emergency judicial intervention in her amicus brief filed with the court. When private corporate power begins exercising what amounts to governmental authority over political participation, traditional property rights must yield to constitutional imperatives, she wrote. The Commerce Clause was designed to prevent exactly this scenario: private control over the infrastructure that democracy requires to function. Emergency judicial powers exist precisely for moments when democratic institutions cannot protect themselves through normal political processes. The legal theory is actually straightforward when you cut through the complexity. The Constitution grants government authority to regulate interstate commerce, specifically to prevent private monopolistic control over essential economic infrastructure. Information flow and payment processing are now as essential to political participation as roads and postal service were in 1787. When a private citizen gains the power to determine which political speech gets heard and which businesses survive based on political alignment, that person is exercising governmental authority without democratic accountability. Emergency judicial seizure during clear and present danger to democratic institutions has precedent dating to Abraham Lincoln's suspension of habeas corpus and Franklin Roosevelt's bank holiday during the Great Depression. Judge Patricia Morrison worked through the night of January 3rd, reviewing evidence packages compiled by attorneys general from 12 states. Her 47-page ruling cited 43 specific instances of coordinated political interference across multiple platforms. The documented evidence shows systematic suppression of voter registration drives, targeted economic pressure against political opponents, coordinated information blackouts during democratic organizing activities, and algorithmic manipulation designed to influence electoral outcomes. This pattern of behavior constitutes a clear and present danger to the constitutional order, she wrote in the emergency ruling issued at 2:17 a.m. on January 4th. The scope of private power that triggered judicial intervention exceeds anything seen in American history. Standard Oil controlled 91% of oil refining when the Supreme Court broke it up in 1911, but oil was one industry. This tech empire controls the communication infrastructure for 2.4 billion users, payment processing for 847,000 businesses, satellite internet for rural communities, and artificial intelligence systems training on every digital interaction. Combined market influence across information, commerce, and communication infrastructure represents unprecedented concentration of power in human history. When one person can determine who gets to speak, who gets to participate economically, and who gets access to information, that person has become a private government operating outside constitutional constraints. Here's what the domino chain looks like when you follow it to its logical conclusion. Private control over communication platforms means private control over which political ideas get heard. Private control over payment systems means private control over which political activities get funded. Private control over internet infrastructure means private control over which communities can organize. Private control over artificial intelligence means private control over which decisions get automated across society. Add them together and you have private control over democratic participation itself. That is the definition of corporate authoritarianism, and that is why a federal judge seized an empire to save a republic. Here's the exact 72-hour timeline that changed corporate law in America forever. January 3rd, 9:17 a.m. Eastern, emergency motion filed simultaneously by attorneys general from 12 states in federal district court for the District of Columbia. The motion cited imminent threat to democratic institutions and requested immediate seizure of corporate assets under emergency judicial powers. January 3rd, 4:23 p.m., Judge Patricia Morrison begins reviewing the 847-page evidence package compiled by state investigators over 6 months. Internal company documents, algorithm analysis, financial transaction records, and testimony from 23 affected business owners. January 4th, 2:17 a.m., Judge Morrison issues unprecedented emergency ruling, placing 12 companies under federal receivership. She worked through the night because, in her own words, democracy cannot wait for normal court schedules. The immediate consequences rippled through global markets before most Americans woke up on January 4th. Stock market opened with $200 billion in technology sector losses as investors realized the precedent implications. 12 companies with combined annual revenue of $340 billion operating under direct federal oversight for the first time in American corporate history. Emergency Supreme Court appeal filed by company attorneys at 6:45 a.m., refused by 8:30 a.m. without comment. Translation: even the Supreme Court understood this precedent was too important to reverse without full consideration. Dr. Marcus Williams, constitutional law expert at Yale, told CNBC that morning, "Every technology CEO in America is watching this case because it fundamentally redefines the relationship between private power and democratic authority. This could be the beginning of a complete restructuring of how we regulate platform-based monopolies, not the end." Professor Janet Chen from University of Chicago Law School added, "We are witnessing the real-time creation of constitutional doctrine for the digital age. Emergency judicial seizure powers haven't been used since the Great Depression, but the principle remains sound. Private power cannot be allowed to threaten democratic institutions." The success counterexample emerged within hours of the federal takeover. Decentralized payment platforms saw user registrations increase by 340% in the first week of January. Independent social media alternatives gained 2.7 million new accounts as users migrated away from the seized platforms. Small business lending cooperatives reported 1,200% increase in applications from entrepreneurs who had been frozen out of traditional payment systems. Innovation capital that had been concentrated in monopolistic control systems suddenly flowed toward competitive alternatives. Translation: breaking up concentrated private power immediately unleashed market competition and democratic participation. Senator Rebecca Williams, chair of the Senate Banking Committee, announced emergency hearings for January 15th. "The question before Congress is not whether this judicial action was legally justified," she said in a press statement. The evidence clearly shows it was constitutional and necessary. The question is whether we will create legislative frameworks to prevent private citizens from accumulating this level of democratic control again. We cannot rely on emergency judicial intervention every time a billionaire decides to play government. Maria Santos, the restaurant owner whose account was frozen, received notification on January 5th that her $12,000 was released and her payment processing restored under federal oversight. But the broader question remains, should private companies have the power to destroy small businesses based on political speech in the first place? Constitutional law professor David Morrison framed the accountability dilemma perfectly. Either we accept that judges can seize private property to protect democratic institutions, or we accept that private property can be used to destroy democratic institutions. There is no middle ground in this constitutional moment.